Last week, Citi raised its price target on Shopify from $90 to $103. We're talking US dollars here, citing optimism about the company's revenue growth next year. Let's bring in Tyler Radke, Director and Senior Equity Research Analyst at Citi. Tyler, thanks very much for coming on the show.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
What do you think are the main reasons to buy Shopify right now?
I think there's a lot, and I'll just start high level, and I'm sure we can get into the details. But ultimately, we believe heading into next year, this is a name you want to own. We think revenue growth is going to reaccelerate. Operating profit is also going to reaccelerate. The company is benefiting from some share gains against competitors. We also see a more resilient consumer backdrop, potentially even boosted by rates coming down and oil prices coming down. And then on margins, the company continues to operate very efficiently. As we look at their hiring, they're continuing to hire at a very slow pace, and they're making strategic investments that we think can return in terms of higher revenue growth next year. So as we look at our numbers, we think they grow operating profit over 50% next year, which will really help this company grow into its valuation, especially if you see revenue growth reaccelerate.
And why is that? Are they getting, they're not just about small merchants, are they? They deal with big internet vendors as well. Can you tell us, where are they seeing the biggest growth, or is there a difference, the big customers or the small ones?
Yeah, absolutely. And you pointed out, right, Shopify was, as we know, the company from certainly when it went public, it was synonymous with SMB. They have north of 2 million different small merchants using their platform. Folks could be selling just T-shirts, but recent years they've had a lot of success tackling some of the larger merchants, and you've seen this come at the expense of some of the incumbent software vendors. So companies like Salesforce, companies like Adobe, companies like IBM and Oracle. If you look at their commerce offerings, they've really stalled. As an example, last quarter, Salesforce reported about 3% marketing and commerce revenue growth. Shopify did about 25%. So we see a lot of that share gain coming from kind of these incumbents. Also SMB, I mean, they continue to dominate that space. New business formation continues to be relatively healthy, all things considered.
What are the challenges for Shopify right now? I mean, they had one big false start. They thought they'd get into warehouses and fulfillment. They backed away from that. Have they had any other major obstacles over the past couple of years?
Yeah, and look, I think you brought up a good point. We have not always been buyers or bullish on Shopify stock. We actually put a buy rating on it for the first time earlier this year. Partially just because we liked a lot of the things they did last year. You mentioned getting out of the warehouse business. Obviously, that's a very capital-intensive business. It was something that did not prove to be successful for them, and we really liked, kind of the new leadership team in terms of the efficiencies that they drove for the business. They took operating margins which were below 0%. Up to close to 20%, really in about 6 quarters, which was a remarkable turnaround. So we think that new culture is embedded at the company. And so, in terms of challenges, I think there was a little bit of controversy earlier this year. They did start to increase investments. Again, these were much more targeted performance marketing related spend. So things like advertising, trying to acquire new merchants via new channels. We think those investments have largely peaked, and you're going to start to see the returns of those investments in the quarters ahead.
So they spend on marketing, and you look at the return on investment. How do they market? I guess social media, or what is their big marketing spending expense?
Yeah, so they have a bunch of different channels. So about a year ago, they talked about kind of investing in almost a dozen different channels. So I've seen it even here around New York City. You'll see billboards. Sometimes you'll see commercials. I think I was watching football the other day. I saw a commercial for Shopify. You'll also just see it in web search and other, email marketing. So there's dozens of these. Social, as you mentioned, because look, merchants are everywhere, right? And social is a very good selling environment. So it's kind of all across the board, but I think they're doing it in a very targeted way. It's not just throwing dollars at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's measured on very discrete payback periods, and so we think those returns, given that they are spending, you're going to start to see those returns here in the coming quarters. And
just finally, in your report, you note you point to Shopify's push up market. What do you mean by up market there in that context?
Yeah, so upmarket, what we were talking about earlier, some of the bigger merchants, right? So moving away from just SMBs, yeah.
So you're not talking about Gucci and the likes of that in this context?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think upmarket would include that, but not just luxury retail, right? I think but that would be an example of a bigger customer, obviously.
And finally, Tyler, I mean, this company, is it fair to say it's a global phenomenon? It apparently has millions of customers, and they're in more than 100 countries.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and what's interesting is their international success has been a big hit over the last few quarters, even in markets like the UK and parts of Europe that have been kind of teetering on recession, and retail sales have been pretty sluggish. Shopify has been growing 20-30%, which is well above the market. They have a lot of room to grow, and frankly, there are a lot of international markets, particularly in things like Western Europe, which are further behind in terms of the percentage of retail sales that are on e-commerce, right? So more of that secular tailwind to go, particularly internationally.